So, hi, my name is Justice Miles. This is When the Artist Speaks. I'm super excited to interview Rico about jazz, and he is this amazing jazz musician. So, thank you so much for being here today, Rico.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Nice. So, I was wondering, can you explain a little bit about jazz music and history? There might be some people who know of jazz but haven't studied it as much. And so, could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Maybe the first thing I would say, because I believe in some ways that there is maybe some misconceptions. And the misconception is the element of improvisation. So, all the world around, pretty much since the advent of music, there's been different cultural outgrowths where people come together and make music and um, you know, inevitably, improvisation, I think, is always really been a part of different folk musics the world around. Um, so, I would preface this by saying just having improvisation in a different culture, in a musical cultural framework, doesn't necessarily make it jazz. Now, talking a bit about the history of jazz music came about around uh, towards the late 1800s, early 1900s in the United States. And jazz music is predominantly a Black American art form. So there's different influences that came together initially to make jazz music. There's, you know, sacred songs, gospel music, field hollers, um, different traditional musics from the African diaspora, I would say, and then also different elements of popular music from the times in the early 1800s. So there's Western classical music, there's also operatic music, ragtime, which is sort of a dance music, and much more. But in short, it's a Black American cultural art form. And of course, over the history of jazz music, many different people from all sorts of walks of life have taken part in this cultural framework and fabric and added to the story, let's say. But really, I can't understate the importance of Black American history in jazz. That's what uniquely makes this improvisational art form jazz, as opposed to say, something else like Indian classical music or any of the folk musics from Europe. Another important thing I should say too is the element of blues. Without the blues element, that's it's missing something for jazz music. So we have blues, gospel, and and swing, of course, too. I hope that's
Yeah,
concise enough.
no, that's super amazing. Thank you. Um, I was wondering um about, can you explain a bit about the role of improvisation in jazz? And then adding on to that, what are some of the things that jazz musicians think about when improvising? And kind of like what advice do you have for students that want to learn about jazz or how to improvise in jazz?
Okay. Well, there's a lot of different things you can think about in, um, as a musician who's improvising. Now, maybe the obvious answer would be the foundational elements or the technical elements. I would say that's maybe like the lower level, right? Those that's the we're talking about the building blocks, the fundamental elements, but that doesn't necessarily cover, aspects of human expression or telling a story or moving the audience, right? But those are those are the ABC elements that any aspiring musician or artist would need to learn to improvise. But I think at the highest level, when you're improvising, it's hard to really say, but I really believe that the highest level improvisation is a really profound language that speaks on an intuitive level, and it speaks to the subconscious mind, right? So it's I mean it's really hard to say because I think for me and for other artists, when you're in the improvisational state, you're really not consciously creating. You're kind of letting yourself create on a subconscious level. You know, I feel oftentimes when I'm really hyper aware of the different musical elements, I'm not at my best. If I have to really think, okay, what's coming next, or how do I do this or that, or you know, when I'm thinking about my ABCs, I'm not going to be able to have a conversation and express myself. So yeah, I really think improvisation is about expressing something intangible and connecting with the audience. I also oftentimes I think about, one of the things that really drew me into instrumental music was film music, and I think the greatest film writers or the greatest stories that you connect with have um, really strong music that is intrinsically tied to the emotions of the story, right? When you hear the music of a film you're familiar with, you can think of those beats of the story. You know the love song, you know that melancholy song when a character you love dies, or you know the really triumphant melody when the hero saves the day and overcomes evil. It's kind of the same for me, the same kind of emotional feelings I'm looking for when I'm playing music, when I'm improvising. I want to transmute that to the audience. Going on to what I think that any aspiring musician or improviser should go about doing, or anybody interested in jazz, I would say maybe the first, most important thing is to listen, um, uninterrupted, because it's pretty commonplace these days. Oh, okay, I'll throw a record on while I'm, putting my clothes on, or while I'm brushing my teeth, or making dinner, or hanging out with friends, and that's all good and well. But I think in the same way, going back to movies, if you like to unwind and enter a different world by watching a movie or by, reading a book, it's the same kind of process. You want to get into that different world by fully immersing yourself in the music, granting your attention to it, meditating with it. You're not thinking about anything else other than how the music makes you feel and where it's taking you. Maybe allowing yourself to have uh, free associations, creative associations. Are you imagining colors? Are you seeing images? Does it remind you of going to the mountains, or going to the beach, or spending time with your grandparents, or spending time with another loved one? Those are important tools. Or it could be just as simple as, how is it making me feel? Excited? Does it make my heart hurt in a good way? That's important. The second thing I would say, this is what really, really made me passionate growing up. Uh, Being able to go out into your community and seeing the master musicians, the elders in the community, perform at a high level, and seeing what they're about and how they express the music. A beautiful thing about jazz is, the world is really connected, so there is a lot more in common now than ever, but each place has its own unique musical culture. So when you go out into the community and you seek out the local jazz artists, you really get a taste for your community, a taste for the culture. And they have, the elders, I mean, have very important information and knowledge and experience that a lot of young people don't have. So it's important that we spend time with people like that.
Yeah, I also kind of have a follow-up question. I've always been curious about this. Like is there a thing of like younger jazz artists like studying like the solos or the improvisational solos of like other master artists, and do they like, I've always been curious, like do they like use licks from different people, or do they draw inspiration and then do something else? Or I've always been curious about that process of really looking at kind of the greats and figuring out kind of what ends up being your own voice and stuff.
Sure. Well, I think it's part of the process of learning how to, like I said, speak in that musical language. Um, on a technical level, you're understanding how these masterful artists are putting together different foundational elements of music to make something That sounds profound, you know. But when you're able to take these things apart, you say, "Oh, I see. Here's a piece of a scale, or a piece of a, arpeggio, or a piece of a melody from another song that they put together." Or you can come at it from this analytical and intellectual perspective, which is helpful. It's helpful to dissect it, helpful to label different things. You could also approach it just from by ear, and learn it by ear as opposed to writing it down and analyzing it. Um, some people will just transcribe and take these melodies and learn them in all different keys, different registers, and learn how to apply them in different scenarios. Say you take it from Charlie Parker or you take something from Bud Powell, and people will be content with that. And um, I can understand why, because it's a very high level of expression. Those are some of the greatest artists, and you know to even be close to that level is a feat in itself. But there's different levels to that. You take melodies that you like. Maybe Bud Powell has a pattern you like, so you integrate that into your toolbox. Sometimes you might learn these solos, write them down, or learn them by memory, and kind of take the concept. Maybe it's a rhythmic concept or a melodic concept. The way they play different notes, or the way they separate the notes, and you could take the concept and you know create something new with the ideas that you get from those solos. But I think ultimately it's just a way to explore other people's approaches. Maybe in other words, it could be like, I use this analogy a lot. I don't know if it's a good one, but I always liked building things with Legos. So the elemental foundational materials of music are like the little pieces. And if you know anything about, Legos, there's, the sets you can buy at stores, but there's also creative people who make up their own things. Um, so it could be like you see a person who is very creative with building fantastical, things out of Legos, and you say, oh, okay, so you go check out how they built that thing, and you take it apart. Oh, they use the piece like this, and they put it this way. It's the same thing with music. When you learn somebody, so oh, I would have never thought to use this sound or this rhythm in this spot of this song. So you're really seeing how people take like I said, the little building blocks and putting them together. Because the amazing thing is, like with Legos, you can put it together a million different ways. You can put the notes and music together in a million different ways, or approach a color, let's say a color, a harmony, in a million different ways. Just the same way a painter can, get all of these different shades of green by mixing things. You can do the same thing with those different sounds in music.
Yeah, no, that is so interesting. Yeah, I saw this video recently of a flamenco guy talking about like blocks or Legos. And so I thought that was so interesting. You also use that analogy with jazz. So interesting. That's so cool. Okay. So you've done a lot of different things, Rico. You're a musician, a composer, and now you also teach and mentor students. Can you speak a bit about your journey and what you've learned being in these different roles that you've had?
Hmm. Well, um, I'm very blessed because I feel that um, pretty much ever since I started playing music, I had the opportunity to have mentorship. Of course, I had private lessons, and that's pretty commonplace. And I'm very thankful for those. My parents, really went above and beyond in ways I never couldn't really fully realize until now. But my parents would take me out at pretty much within the first year of taking interest in music. They would take me out to live concerts at night, on even on school nights. They would take me out maybe till 10 o'clock at night, and I would see local artists performing. And I can't really remember, but I'm assuming my parents encouraged me even to approach these people and talk to them, ask them questions, because I was so enthused. And those people on the bandstand that my parents would take me to see every week would become mentors to me. People like Laura Newman, a saxophone player in Denver, Alan Rucker, a wonderful vocalist and piano player, Joe Fredrickson, another great drummer, Vlad Gersovic, a great piano player. They were all in a band, and my mom would take me to see them every Wednesday, and I would hang out with them and ask questions, spend time with them. And those people, among others, I could name a million other people, people like John Romero. Um, uh, but I would spend time with elders. I was like 10 or 12 years old, and these people were, 30, 40, 50, 60 years old, telling me stories about music, their experiences, or artists I admired. Um, that was very important to me. Those were people that I idolized Coltrane or Miles Davis or, what have you, Thelonious Monk. But these people were right there in front of me, and I, just in the same way I would imagine to be, those people I mentioned, I would imagine to be these people in my own community. I really wanted to aspire to be like them, and I think that was invaluable because it really uh, lit passion in my heart and motivated me to want to aspire to be better. Um, you know, I think that that kind of has really continued to this day. When I went to New York, I would seek out greater, people that I knew about in Colorado through records. People like David Kukoski or Vincent Herring. Um, Other people like. Recently I've been studying with a tenor saxophone player named George Coleman, um, Charles McPherson. Just these different people I would seek out. And Benny Maupin is another person who recorded with Miles Davis. And I guess the main idea is like, I'm always looking for people that inspire me and I know have experience and wisdom that I have yet to incorporate, in my perspective. I think that's of the utmost importance because I love spending time with my peers. Being with people who are the same age, we're able to see, what's on the horizon. We're able to think creatively and kind of think of things without, maybe having a jaded perspective. Oh, this doesn't work, or we don't think like that way per se. But being around more experienced people, they are able to inform you of the pitfalls socially or musically. And I think that that's really important. They're also able to tell you, hey, here's a tradition that's been happening. This is how you're supposed to put a set of music together. Or when you're writing music, you want to look out, maybe don't do this, try this, Or you always want to change up the grooves. You don't want to have the same tempo for the entire concert. You have to have a ballad in there. You have to have variation or what have you. Or maybe you want to play lyrical sometimes. You don't have to play fast all the time. You don't need to do that. You don't necessarily get that from peers, but you do get that tough love from older musicians. And so even to this day, I seek out people like that. I seek out people who humble me and show me that I have a lot more to learn. Um, you know, that also includes my peers. There's plenty of people who I find very inspiring and make me want to go practice. But going on to teaching now, I just love to practice music and work on the craft, and so getting to spend time doing that with younger people who are interested is a real blessing. Um, I try to keep my mindset flexible. I know everybody's not going to want to be a professional artist, but um, I hope that my endeavors with youth at least will show them that they have the capability to pretty much achieve anything they set their mind to if they're able to, exercise diligence and focus and determination over a period of time. So, in short, I want them to learn how to teach themselves because I know that'll take them anywhere they want to go in life.
Nice. Um, yeah, no, that is super cool, Rico. I love it. Okay. So you have gotten to perform in a lot of places, Colorado, New York, Paris. Can you explain a little bit about what it was like performing in Europe versus the States? And part two to that is what is your favorite performance you've ever done?
Well, um, I don't want to speak in too broad of terms, but I will say, when I went to perform in Paris, I noticed that I found it pretty astounding. There's a couple experiences I had. One time, this is, I believe it was before I performed, but I happened to be going there with family just shortly before, and funny enough, I saw a friend from New York there in front of one of the clubs, Small World. Well, my friend was there with her boyfriend, and so we went into the club that I later would be playing in, and there was an ensemble playing. The house was packed, and we were in the very back. I was keenly listening to the music like everyone else, but my friend and her partner, um, who weren't musicians really, they were talking, they were conversing. I wouldn't say too boisterously, but loud enough that other people could hear. And I remember seeing the entire audience in this club turn around and glare at them. And that's something I'd never ever experienced in the United States. Even in a place like in Denver, Colorado, in at Dazzle, which is a place I grew up. Another place my parents would take me to week after week for the jam session and whatnot. It was a beautiful, beautiful place where I saw so many great people like your father and artists from all around the world come. But even at Dazzle, when every once in a while there'd be that person who didn't get the memo that we're there to enjoy and immerse in the music, people might complain or kind of glare, but I never had ever seen the entire audience turn around and look at somebody for talking at Dazzle. Well, they did in Paris. So, that's the kind of audiences. I mean, those people weren't even musicians. They were just lovers of music. And that's how serious they were. Um, you know, so when I got to perform there, it was kind of that same level of attention. It was a packed house. And, I mean, at the time, I still, I'm still developing my name to this day, but even then, it's not like a lot of people in Paris knew who I was. But it was a packed house, and they were very keenly listening. It was a special opportunity.
That is so cool. Yeah.
Um,
So much. I
mhm.
just feel like Europe has such an appreciation for jazz. It's really interesting. And Paris, such a history. I feel just, yeah, very cool.
Yeah, yeah, I would say. I mean, it's another thing. I would say. I mean, going back to the, it's hard for me to think about a favorite concert, but I have this other thing about the listening thing with audiences. I remember growing up, something about the music just spoke to me. But I remember before I was aware of all of these different fundamental building blocks and recognizing these patterns, just like people recognize patterns in language, I just liked the energy and the emotion of the music. I didn't always understand what was being said or what these colors meant or these sounds, right? They only made sense later. So I can understand that for people who aren't necessarily, you know, committing their lives to the study of music, it can sound a little esoteric. But I think maybe a main thing that people can do to really connect is practicing focus. It's like a meditation. If you can't sit silently in a movie theater without checking your phone, or sit silently and read a book without having to look at your phone for an hour, it's kind of be hard to listen to music for 45 minutes to an hour. It is a practice in mental strength and focus, I think. You have to let go of everything else and just be in the moment, which is a beautiful thing. It's wonderful to be in the moment. And it sometimes also, I think, it can be hard to really get into your feelings. And I think that music challenges people to get into their creativity, get into their feelings. How's this song making me feel? Wow, this is really dissonant and kind of there's some tension there. I don't feel comfortable. I need to talk to my partner sitting next to me. Oh, I need to check my phone because this is intense emotional music. I think sometimes that's what happens. People may feel uncomfortable because it's something that's unfamiliar. Um, I don't know. That's just a thought I have about that. But I think it gets easier with exposure. That's the thing, exposure. Um, favorite performance. Talking about favorite performances. It's hard to say. I know I'm going to pick one, and then a million others are going to come to mind. But um, I would say maybe for now, I had the opportunity to travel around Colorado with Bobby Watson. He's a alto saxophonist and composer. He was music director for Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, and we developed a rapport um, online. I think he heard a recording of me and reached out, and then I asked him if I could call him, and we just started talking about life and music, and eventually the idea came up of him coming through and doing some concerts. So we traveled all around Colorado with Brad Good playing trumpet, Harold Summey playing drums, and Seth Lewis was playing bass, and then Adrian Ferrugia, a Canadian piano player, a friend of Brad Good's, was playing piano, of course. Um, and we were doing all of Bobby Watson's music, arranged for sextet. So I would say that was that was a number of remarkable performances that I hold dear to me. But I could name a million others that I might feel the same way about.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rico, for your time. It has been such a joy to, we knew each other growing up, and my brother and my father knew you as well. So it's just been a joy to see you throughout your journey and all the things that you've accomplished and will accomplish. It's amazing. So my last question is, how can listeners learn more about you and your work? Do you have a website? Do you have an Instagram? How can people keep up to what Rico Jones is doing?
I do have a website. It's ricojonesmusician.com. RICOJONES musician.com. And my Instagram is Rico Jones Music. It's at Rico Jones Music, I should say. Both are okay. My bio is on my website. I frequently post about my performances on Instagram and social media, Facebook. Um, Maybe notably, at this time, I'm going to put out an album sometime in the near future. A new album, all original music. It's recorded on this nonprofit label called Giant Step Arts. It's produced by a famous, well-known jazz photographer, Jimmy Katz. He's photographed a lot of great artists over the years, and he's also a remarkable sound engineer. And he's done many recording projects over the years, and it's an album entitled Bloodlines. It's about my connection to my family, my culture, and my identity and my relationship with God. And the artists on the album are Max Light. He's a wonderful guitar player. He's a peer of mine, and a couple elder musicians who I've really admired over the years. Joe Martin on bass and Sheet Waits on drums. So that'll be coming out in the near future, and we have a concert coming up with that ensemble in January at this place called Zinc Bar in New York City.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Rico. I really appreciate it.
It's always a pleasure to spend time with you. Thank you for thinking of me.